I'm coming to you live from Tampa, Florida, and it's really great to have you all come visit me for once, because usually I'm the one who's out traveling to different states around the country, visiting your schools and libraries. And it's kind of nice for you to get a little peek into different people's workspace so you can see, the place where the magic happens. And this is my office here in my house in Florida, where I have my books behind me, books I use for research, and books from author friends of mine, my books and awards, and my paintings, a lot of which are by Jesse Joshua Watson, who did the illustrations for Ghetto Cowboy. And over here is kind of like, these are all the projects I'm working on at the moment. So there's like 5 or 6 different things. And this is my desk, where I'm either, writing something, or I'm doing research, or I'm, revising. I might be writing articles that go along with the book, and usually I might be planning travel, because I do travel a lot. In fact, I just got back from Russia, which is an amazing trip, and so being an author has really opened up a lot of things in my life. Being there made me realize what it is I do that's different, because all of my books, and Ghetto Cowboy is a great example, are inspired by real life. So a lot of authors I know just sit at their desk and they just make things up. They pull stories and ideas from their head. That's what a lot of writers do, but that's not how I work. And part of that is because Florida is a place where everything is bigger than life. I mean, we have manatees and alligators, and there's a jungle behind my house like the Amazon, and we have hurricanes. And so me just making things up from scratch just can't compete with what is actually happening around me. So a friend of mine sent me an article about this neighborhood in North Philadelphia, and I started seeing these photographs that really blew my mind. It's a neighborhood most people don't know about, even people who live there their whole lives. And a lot of people would say that's a really bad neighborhood, you don't want to go there. But buried within this neighborhood is this world of black urban cowboys. And I started seeing these pictures, and I had never seen anything like that. And this is how I write my stories. I come across something, one moment I had never heard of it, and the next moment I'm just consumed by it because I'm so fascinated that it even exists. I want to know everything about it, and the fact that nobody has written about it yet is even more intriguing to me. So I just started to dig into the real life of this neighborhood and knew immediately this was a great place to set a story, because it was kind of like a modern day Western to me. Things that were going on there just kind of twisted the whole meaning of what it is to be a cowboy to me. And this story is about a young boy named Cole, who's 11, who lives in Detroit, and he's at that special age when you drive your mother absolutely crazy. And he's at the point where he's driven his mother to the end of her rope, to the point where she no longer feels she can handle him anymore. So one day after his latest detention, she gets him in a car and they drive from Detroit to Philadelphia, where she leaves him on the doorstep of the father he's never met before, who turns out to be one of these cowboys. And suddenly he's thrust into this completely alien world, and all he wants to do is get home. But slowly he's going to discover his inner cowboy, and what makes this world so amazing and special. So I'm just going to read you a little bit here from chapter 5, and this is literally like 20 minutes after he's been left abandoned with this stranger he's never known in this completely alien world. And the father, whose name is Harper, brings him into the house and basically leaves him there. So this is his first kind of moment alone, or almost alone, as you'll find out. The front door is open. I walk in and the first thing I smell is horses. I ain't never smelled a horse before, never even saw one up close before a few minutes ago. But if a horse got a smell, I think this is it, 'cause that's all that's in here. Horse stuff. A couple old saddles, blankets, brushes, work boots, horse things like you see on TV. Instead of furniture, there's even them square things of hay to sit on. This ain't a house, it's a barn. To top it off, there's a big old hole from floor to ceiling knocked into the side of the living room, leading into the place next door, like he just wanted to expand his crib and took over the abandoned one next to his. I peek inside the hole, but it's dark, 'cause all the windows is boarded up. But man, it really smells like animal in there. Suddenly something big moves in the dark and I jump back. "That's lightning," says Harper. My eyes adjust to a pair of dark eyes staring back at me. It's a horse. He got a horse in the house. No wonder Mama left him. "Just temporary accommodations till I fix his stall. One of the stable walls kind of fell in last month. Lucky for me, next door has been boarded up for a while. Won't nobody mind if I'm using it." Now I've seen everything, I think. Harper must see my eyes bugging out, 'cause he kind of smirks and says, "Welcome to Philly, boy." That feels like a dare, like he thinks I'm scared of that thing. That horse is big, bigger than any living thing I ever seen, but I ain't gonna let no horse show me up. I drop my bags and take a step closer. The air is thick and musty. My eyes get used to the dark, and I can see there's hay on the floor and a bucket of water near the wall. Lightning staring at me with one big eye, his nostrils sniffing at me. His hooves clomp on the floorboards. I take another step, but the horse suddenly neighs and stomps his foot right in front of me. I stumble back into the room and right into Harper. Harper shakes his head like I just proved him right. He don't like strangers. He's just used to living with me. You'll have to earn his trust. I scowl. "Earn his trust? He's just a horse." "And you're just a boy," he says. He gives me a long look. "Take your stuff upstairs. There's a space I cleared for you. Get settled, then come find me." Then he walks out the door again, leaving me all alone with that monster. "I ain't no boy," I say. But I go upstairs anyway, 'cause I think that horse can't climb steps. But up there ain't no better. These houses is tall and skinny, only one room wide. And that's it. There's one room, his room, which got a bed, a bathroom, and a closet. I look in the closet and see he piled stuff out of it and put a blanket on the floor. No. I ain't no Harry Potter. I ain't living in no closet. I got to think. I look around for a phone, but there ain't one that I can see. No matter, I guess since I can't call Mama on account she ain't home yet. And my friends ain't got no car, so they can't help me neither. Maybe they don't even know that I'm gone, since most of them drift in and out depending on if they're in juvie or not. One more gone ain't gonna make a difference. So I sit on the edge of the bed and bury my head in my hands. What am I gonna do? My head aches and my stomach hurts. I just roll up on the bed and hope this is some nasty dream that's gonna go away. But after an hour, nothing changes. My eyes wander around the room, stopping at a picture on his dresser. It's of a young guy with a racehorse. It looks like Harper a long time ago. He's at a racetrack next to a sign that says Philadelphia Park, standing in front of a horse with one of them fancy riders on top. Then there's another picture, him riding a horse through the streets next to some pimped out caddy. Man, who ever heard of horses in the hood? So that'll just give you a taste of what's going on with young Cole there. But what's really fascinating, what's happening in real life, and actually it's a story that continues today, which is this tradition that's been going on for 100 years. At one point there were about 800 black urban cowboys in this neighborhood. And slowly the city and developers have been chipping away at this neighborhood, taking a little bit at a time, until now they're down to about 50 guys left. And so I really wanted to write this book to kind of save it in the archives so that there was evidence that these people actually existed, because it is really a special place. But as I wrote it and the book came out, one of the great things is you travel around, and I started to learn that Philadelphia wasn't the only place that had black urban cowboys. I would see them in New York, in Brooklyn, in DC, in St. Louis, in Los Angeles, in New Orleans, and it turned out they were all over. And sometimes kids would come to see me on their horses, and they would be like, "We're the actual Ghetto Cowboys." So being an author is an amazing experience, to not only share these stories, but then to have the stories come back to you. So I know there are questions coming in, and I will answer questions as we go, but I also wanted to show you another book that I have coming out in September. It's called Hello, I'm Johnny Cash. And for those of you who don't know who Johnny Cash was, he was one of the great voices of American history, and his life kind of chronicled the actual events of the 20th century. But he was a really famous singer, songwriter, country music, rock and roll, all kinds of things. But his life was really extraordinary, and most people don't know his early life, which is an amazing story of overcoming incredible hardship and tragedy, escaping the Great Depression, living in poverty, and having his brother and best friend killed, and all kinds of things that he had to overcome. And once you hear his story of his childhood, you start to understand how he became, what he became. So I just wanted to give you a little taste. And each page is has a title that's one of the songs that he's sung or wrote. So here's a little taste how the book opens. Before he became Johnny Cash, he was simply called JR, a name that stood for nothing, and nothing was all he had coming into this world. By the time he was 3, JR's family was close to ruin, forced to flee southern Arkansas before the desperate winds of the Great Depression turned them all to dust. They hit the road searching for a better life, with nothing but the clothes on their backs, a few belongings, and Mama's old beat-up guitar. It was on that bitterly cold journey north that JR sang his first song, huddled next to his brothers and sisters in the back of a flatbed truck. JR sang aloud, his teeth clattering as Mama beat out the gospels on her guitar. "I am bound for the promised land," they cried out, the wind howling all around them. Scared and hungry, JR asked, "Where is the promised land, Mama?" She smiled and said, 2 days north in a place called Dias, where the mud of the black delta land was as thick as gumbo and the promise of the New Deal as good as gold. JR kept singing that song over and over, hoping and praying that promise would come true. So it kind of takes us through, they land in the middle of nothing, and they literally have to build their lives from the ground up with nothing but their hands and their brains. And it's an amazing tribute as he grows up and slowly discovers that he has a special gift, the gift of his voice, and how he learns music, and the tragedy that he has to overcome of losing his brother. It's really a special, special story. Even when he grows up, he was there at the birth of rock and roll with Elvis and all that, and so it's one of my favorite stories, and I'm so excited that it's going to be coming out. So let me answer some questions, and we can go back and forth a little bit here. So, from Corey, did you grow up with animals at home? Well, I've always had a cat somewhere. And right now I have a cat that came out of the jungle literally during a hurricane. When I was during the eye of the hurricane that passed over, I was out cleaning up the debris, and I heard some animal sounds coming from the bush, and I looked in, and there was this cat, and she had just had babies in this bush during the hurricane. And so they adopted us, we adopted them, and we have cats. There were always animals coming in and out: cats, chickens, hamsters, guinea pigs, snakes. I even had a scorpion once. From Mrs. Felton's 5th grade, what part of the writing process do you find most challenging? Well, the most fun is when you get that initial idea and your brain is just going a million miles an hour, and you can see it and you can feel it, but you have to find it. You have to dig through that, and everything's jumbled up in your head, and part of it is just getting it out into the computer or onto paper so you can see what you have to work with. So the fun part is like forming that for the first time. The hard part is then, once that's all out, it's usually a huge mess, and you have to go in and make sense of everything. And that's like, it's like you just dumped a 5,000 piece puzzle into a pile, and you know it's going to make a great picture, but now you got to figure out how it fits together. So that's the hard part. Is any part of this story based on you or someone you know? The main character, Cole, is inspired by several boys that I've come in contact with over the years at different schools, and I kind of see him everywhere I go. And so I know him, I feel. And of course there's part of me in there too, because anytime you write from yourself, even if you're writing another character, parts of you come out as well. So the part that's always in trouble and making people's lives a little insane. But I'm also in the father character, because I'm a father now as well, and a teacher, and so I can see myself in different characters at different ages, and I think that's part of what helps bring them to life. Have you ever worked with horses? My cousin is a horse trainer and horse expert. In fact, I just finished writing a graphic novel, which will be my next book. She has an amazing story, but that's for another time. So she was my expert. I also had an uncle who had horses in East Los Angeles. It was kind of an urban horse rider as well. But, you know, I've ridden. I wouldn't call myself an expert by any stretch. My kids are asking, why did you use the word ghetto in your book's title? That's a good question. Because when you see the word cowboy, you get an image, and it's usually the image of some white guy on a horse riding across the plains of Texas. And what I found out when I started looking into this story is that the word cowboy actually started as a black word, going back to before the Civil War when there were slaves. If you were a slave and you worked in the house, you were called a houseboy. If you were a slave and worked with the cows, you were called a cowboy. And these guys were expert horse wranglers, and they would control the cows on their horses. And they were so good that it soon became a compliment to be called a cowboy. And when I went there, one of the first things I saw was these kids, you know, black young kids, and they would say things like, you know, we ghetto cowboys, you know. And I just loved that, because you just put cowboy by itself, you know, it's one thing. As soon as you stick ghetto in that image, then suddenly it completely changes the meaning. Why did you choose Philadelphia as the place? Well, that's where the actual story happened, and it is happening. So it had to be there. Do you relate to Johnny Cash's life in any way? Well, I find his story very inspiring. You know, I kind of came to his music late in life, but I was particularly struck by his own writing of his childhood, and those stories really moved me personally. But also, just as an artist, all the things he overcame and the determination to be unique in what he does and to stick to it no matter what anybody says is constantly inspiring to me. Have any of your books received awards? Yes, you can see a bunch of awards up there. Um, this book, Yummy, won a Coretta Scott King Award and won an award from the Museum of Tolerance, Simon Wiesenthal Center. Um, Ghetto Cowboy won a Horace Mann Upstander Award, which is an award for books that deal with social justice. It won an audiobook award from the American Library Association, and I also got an award, a poetry award, for a book that I wrote in free verse, Chest Rumble. It was my first book that came out, and it was told in poetry, and the fact that it got this big poetry prize really blew my mind, because I would never call myself a poet. So it made me realize that, there's a poet probably in all of us, and if you just take the chance, the risks, to try something that maybe you didn't think you could do, you might actually be able to do it. I didn't know what I was doing, but that's how the character was speaking to me. And so my job as a creative person is to give that voice, a stage. Have I ever lived on a farm? I was an exchange student on a farm in Switzerland, if you can believe it. Also, my cousin, the horse trainer, lived on a farm in Texas. So I stayed there a little bit, and I've been on farms here and there, but not really living on one. Do you write books for adults, or do you prefer writing for kids? I write for kids and teenagers, young adults. I just find that world much more interesting, because adults are kind of jaded and cynical, and they've seen a lot of things. And to me, you write about teenagers, it's all about first times. Like the first time you experience something is much more dramatic and exciting. The first time you fall in love, the first time, you get in a fight, the first time, you feel lost and hurt. All these things are really fresh and vivid. And so I like to write about all these things. What inspires you or helps you think up stories? Well, real life is completely my inspiration. Every single book that I've done has been inspired by a real place, a real person, a real event, and I come to them in many different ways. People might show something to me, they might tell me something, I might read something, I might see a documentary, I might hear something on the radio. I never know where the next story is coming from, and it's always completely out of the blue. I just finished something yesterday that a month ago didn't exist in any way at all. I just kind of stumbled across it, and then it's just there, and it totally occupies my brain, and I gotta get it out. So real life is a big inspiration. Do I do my own illustrations? I used to be an illustrator. When I started, I was an artist and a very visual person, but the illustrations I was doing were for really young kids, like toddler ages. And so when I started writing older teen books and things like this, my style wasn't really appropriate. So Jesse Watson did the artwork in Ghetto Cowboy, which is fabulous. You saw that one, but like this stuff. And then Randy DuBourg did Yummy, which is a graphic novel, which is really amazing artwork. And Johnny Cash was done by, where's that book? Ah, here it is. By Mr. A.G. Ford. He's fabulous, and I'm working with a new illustrator now on this graphic novel. So I feel really privileged to team up with other artists, because they bring a whole other sensibility, and they view my story in a way that I probably haven't thought of before. So they're bringing in fresh ideas and different takes on things, and coming at it, visually, like telling the story visually. So the combination of the two really make it powerful in my head. Um, da, 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 da. Does the protagonist ever see his mother again in the book, Ghetto Cowboy? Well, you're just going to have to read it, won't you? um, but I'll say probably yes. What is your favorite Johnny Cash song? Gosh, I'm really a fan of his later work, like all the albums he did before he died, the American record recordings. And one of the last song he wrote, in fact, is called "The Man Comes Around," and it's an amazing song that is really kind of summarizes his whole life. It's quite moving. Do you plan on writing any books in a series? Yeah, the problem is I have so many ideas that I just keep moving forward and forward and forward, and the idea of sticking with one story for a long time while all these other stories go by is, it's almost too much for me. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it if something demanded that much time to tell a longer story, but it hasn't happened yet. Why did you choose to live in Florida? Well, that's a good question. I grew up in California, where I spent most of my life. My wife is a professor, and she got an incredible job offer here at the University of South Florida. And it's not a place I ever considered living, but I've been here 10 years, and I have to say, had I not moved here, I wouldn't have been able to achieve all of this. Like, actually living here allowed me to do this. I used to be a filmmaker living in Hollywood and all that. And that's how I learned how to tell stories, but to actually have the time and to be able to afford taking that chance to become a writer was only afforded by moving here. But it's been very interesting because when I was living in Hollywood, I was surrounded by storytellers, filmmakers, and everybody was interpreting life. And here I'm surrounded by real people, who may or may not know that I'm a writer, and so they're not like interpreting or they want to direct movies or whatever. They're just regular folk. And that's much more conducive to me. I can only create if I'm one of the few doing it. If I'm surrounded by writers, I don't do well at all. I don't like to do what everyone else is doing. I like to be different. When did you decide you wanted to become an author? Total accident. Where's that book? I was making movies and teaching, doing workshops in schools in Los Angeles, and I came across this story about this kid, Yummy Sandifer, and I thought it was going to be a movie, and we were planning on making it a movie, but what I found out was that books or stories are like children. I might want my daughter to grow up to be a doctor or something, but everybody has their own destiny. So the only thing I can do is to help make her the best person possible. And then whatever she's going to be, even if she's becomes the lead singer in a punk rock band, at least she'll be a good human being. And the story is the same way. It turned out this story didn't want to be told as a movie, but wanted to be told as a graphic novel. And that was part of the puzzle to figure out how to tell that story. And so each story is a puzzle that has to be figured out. Every time I start a new story, I think it's going to be this, but it turns out to be that. I think it's going to be a short story, but it wants to be a novel. I think it's going to be a novel, but it wants to be poetry. So you just have to listen to it, and it will tell you what it wants to be. Why do you have to gain a horse's trust? That's a good question. Because horses are very sensitive animals. If you've ever been around a horse, they have like this amazing perceptive ability to know, to smell fear, to smell anger. They know when you're scared of them, particularly if you've never been around a horse before. And if you don't know what you're doing and you get up on a horse, there's more chance that that horse might get injured, and they know it. So you have to build a friendship, you have to build their trust, and how you do that is you learn to take care of the horse, how to brush the horse, how to clean the horse, feed the horse. And once it starts to sense that you're okay, that you feel comfortable around it, then you get up on it and you slowly learn how to ride it, and it gets a feel for you, you get a feel for it, and then you can slowly get out there and then build up speed and learn how to ride the horse proper. But it's a relationship, most definitely. What does free verse mean? Free verse means, you probably know rhyming poetry, where the end of every other sentence might rhyme. So all free verse is that it doesn't rely on a rhyming scheme, but it's like, words are just broken, or sentence is just broken on certain words because there's kind of a rhythm to the way the voice is speaking, and so it puts certain emphasis on certain words, and it's just a way to tell a story that has a certain rhythm to it, but it doesn't rhyme. It's free. What is your favorite book ever that I have that I didn't write? Well, the book that made me a reader is one called The Phantom Toll Booth, which kind of opened my eyes to books in a way that I didn't think was possible, because it has such a crazy, vivid imagination to it. It kind of matched what was going on in my head at that time. So that's kind of a old favorite of mine. Did you ever have a teacher or mentor who encouraged you to write? Well, going back to The Phantom Toll Booth, that book was given to me by a teacher. So that a lot got me into reading, which later got me into writing. Really, the people who encouraged me to write were other writers. When I started, I was part of a book group of kind of beginning writers, and in fact, we just had a reunion yesterday. And in that small group now, there are 6 or 7 published authors, which is pretty amazing. And so it's just a matter of sharing and learning from each other and getting feedback as you read and develop stories. And that's really important, because you have to find your voice. Everybody who's a writer has a unique perspective on the world, but it takes time to figure out the way you're kind of meant to tell stories and what it is you have to offer the world. And you can only do that by experimenting with different genres and different types of writing, and poetry, adult fiction, nonfiction. You just got to play around, and then something will happen where it clicks, and you can feel it, like everything starts to move and starts to happen. So other writers really encouraged me. How many books have I written? So my 5th and 6th books for teens are the ones that are coming out this summer. And I have 3 books that I'm going out with in the next couple months, meaning I have drafts of them and I'm ready to show them to my publishers and hopefully make those projects official or something. And then past those 3, I have 2 or 3 other projects that I may have a draft of or been playing with a little bit. So I don't know how many that is, but it's more than enough. Have you ever seen an alligator in Florida? I see alligators almost every day here. I mean, literally, if I walk out my back door, past my backyard is the jungle. And I walk back 100 yards, I'll be in swamp, land. And I could pretty easily probably find an alligator. So yeah, lots of alligators, lots of creatures you have to deal with firsthand. How old were you when you first started writing? I came to writing late because, as I said, I was a visual person. I was a filmmaker, an artist, illustrator, animator. So writing didn't come to me like in a serious way until about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. But it kind of felt like that was the thing. Of all the things I've done, it felt like this was the thing for me. Um, because when you make a movie, it requires like an awful lot of people and an awful lot of money and time and effort. Everything has to match up perfectly, and you can spend 5 years easily making one movie. But when you write, it's only up to you. And so you can make whatever you want to happen. If you want to write a scene, 10,000 people charge over a hill, to make that into a movie is a big deal. But in a book, you can just write it, and you see it immediately. The reader sees it in their head. And to me, that's an amazing advantage. Have you ever been to the Johnny Cash Museum? Well, there's two new ones. One just opened up this past year. And then his boyhood home, which they've just restored, is also becoming a museum. And this book will be in both of those places. I've been to the boyhood home when they were in the process of bringing it back to life because it was really run down. And that was an amazing experience to go back to because I went to this little town that's so small it's not even on the map. And I was there for what would have been his 80th birthday party with the whole Cash family. And that was pretty amazing. And to stand in all these spots where this story takes place really brought it to life for me. And that's an important part of writing, is to actually be in these places, to feel, to see what the sky looks like, to smell what the air smells like, to feel the wind, to feel the ground, to see what the buildings are like, how the people talk, how they walk, all these details bring a place to life. And that's one of the things I pride myself, because all my books are in different places. New York, St. Louis, Arkansas, Florida, DC, Philadelphia. But all those books I know are successful when people who live in those places, assume that I grew up there. And it was only because I found those details and were able to capture them. If you could only have one thing, what would it be? One thing? Gosh, I don't know. That's a very complicated question. Well, I guess is my family a thing? I think I would want them. Have you ever co-authored a book with somebody? Not as writers, but I collaborate with these artists, and so they're storytellers as well. So that's a collaboration. I have thought about collaborating with another author, and there might be something in that coming up, but we'll see. Do you have fun writing? What is the most challenging part? It's fun when it's going and things are just flowing. You don't have to think about it. It just comes out and it's easy and it's good, and you don't know what's going to happen next, and it's just almost like you're reading it. Time. Okay. We have time for one or two last questions. Okay, let me get to some good ones here. If you were trying to teach a lesson with the book Ghetto Cowboy, what is that lesson? That you should, part of the thing about Ghetto Cowboy is that it's about some form of civil disobedience. And, I don't know if you study civil rights or not, but this idea that if you believe in something and you know it to be right, even if the law at that time does not support that or society doesn't support that yet, you should stand up and help people understand what's special about that and why it should be important to be accepted in the world. To stand up for yourself and your beliefs, I think, are very important. Okay, let's see. One more question here. Is there a common thread to the books that you write? Yes. I mean, first, they're all inspired by real life. All the main characters are kind of outsiders, you know? They don't quite belong in the world that we're visiting here. So they're kind of around the edges of that world, and their whole journey is to figure out, you know, where they belong in that world and how they belong. And so it's kind of a journey of the self, you know. Stories are about journeys, and some are physical journeys that you travel from place to place. But a character arc is the arc of discovery, and a lot of discovery when you're a teenager is finding out who you really are and what you really believe and what you really want to be doing with your life. And that is, to me, is the greatest adventure of all, is to figure out who you are. And it can be quite challenging, and it's full of pain and suffering, but it's also full of great joy. And when you find it and you do it and you know it's right, it's really an amazingly powerful thing. And I discovered it. It took me a long time. So I'm trying to write these different stories and kind of subtly encouraging other young people in that journey, so that they know that they're not alone, that you're not alone, that we all go through this, every single one of us. And so hopefully my books can help bring you along in this journey. And I think my time is up, so I want to thank you all for listening. Please read Ghetto Cowboy if you get the chance. Look for Johnny Cash when it comes out September, and maybe I'll be coming to your city soon. So check my website out, gregneri.com. You'll see where I'm going, and I'm going a lot of places. So thank you, and I will turn it back over to you. Bye.